Hey listeners, Eliza and I are gearing up for a road trip through Southern California. We're exploring off-the-beaten-path food and drink spots and discovering how the state grows its incredible produce sustainably. Do you have a favorite hidden gem we should visit? Maybe a restaurant, bar, or market? We'd love your recommendations from San Diego to the San Gabriel Valley. Write us at hello@tastecooking.com to share. These special episodes, brought to you by our friends at Visit California, drop in late January. Stay tuned.
But in regards to the cauliflower, you want it to be textural. So I think that char and the crispiness that you get from roasting something really hard adds to that kind of soft steamed interior that you're going to get of the cauliflower as well. And a lot of that comes from not fussing with it.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. We loved catching up with the legendary Seattle chef Renee Erickson. She is the chef-owner of the Walrus and the Carpenter, the Whale Winds, Barnacle, and many other restaurants in this great American restaurant city. She is also the author of a really unique new book, Sunlight and Breadcrumbs. It explores creativity in and out of the kitchen and how making everyday food can wind up being much more than dinner. This book is a really smart way to think about home cooking, and I really enjoyed catching up with Renee to talk about her collection of recipes. Renee Erickson, welcome to This is Taste. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Let me first ask you, you're out here on the East Coast. You've been traveling up and down. I know you were in Boston. What do you look for when you're traveling and visiting a new city, or not a new city, but a city?
Sure.
What do you want to see?
I mean, it is exactly what you just said. It's I want to go to old favorites, and then I want to see what is happening that's new and curious and young, and then also things that are similar to what I do, or at least what I would imagine to be similar for just curiosity's sake. So going to Penny will be really fun to see. I'm really excited to see those metal oyster holders on the wall and just kind of see how people create the restaurants. I think is the most inspiring part of it for me, is just kind of getting into a place and kind of looking and seeing what people's decisions are.
Of course. And you have multiple restaurants, so you're always thinking about inspiration. So Renee, before we get into it, let me ask you, your restaurants, I mean, I know Walrus and Carpenter, I know that one I've been multiple times this year, but there's more going on in your portfolio of restaurants in your group. Let's go over all of your restaurants.
Sure. So Walrus is the first one that our company, which is called Sea Creatures, opened, and that will be 15 years next year.
Cool.
We then opened the Whale Winds, which is a wood oven restaurant. Basically, everything kind of gets cooked in the wood oven and somehow touches the smoke and the heat. We have two restaurants on Capitol Hill. One's called Boat Bar, which is another oyster-focused restaurant, and then Bateau, which is our whole cow, grass-fed, grass-finished steakhouse that is a really impressive, incredibly challenging restaurant that thankfully folks love.
But because of the investment you put into it?
Because of the labor of that kind of effort. I think it's a I don't know that there's another place in the world like it, and that's great, and also makes it really, really hard. So I forgot, next to Walrus, we have a very lovely Amari bar called Barnacle. And then downtown in the land of Amazon, we have two spots. One's called Wilmot's Ghost, which is kind of a love letter to Rome, and lots of pizza taglio and supli and vegetables that are inspired off of my time in Italy. We have a bar there called Deep Dive, which is this really beautiful space that is filled with crazy installations by a good friend of ours named Curtis Steiner, who is a madman around making things beautiful. Let's see, Westward, which is one of our newer restaurants, which is on Lake Union, seafood focused as well. Kind of is our largest space, so we're able to do a lot of events, which is great because it's on the lake. And newest, I think I've got everything. Lioness, which is also very. It's our newest. It's tiny. Has 18 seats, little patio, a standing bar. Again, very focused on Italy and just kind of trying to make simple neighborhood food. It's really close to my house, so I can walk there and. Yeah, it's really
wonderful description, Renee, and holy shit. Like, that's some P&Ls. Like, that's a lot of tabs open on your computer when you're looking at that businesses, and I'm so impressed. I've been to a couple of those. I've been to Bateau.
For sure.
Let's talk Seattle. I, criminally had never really spent time in Seattle until this year. I went twice in a year for various reasons. And wow, it blew me away. I had no idea. I was kind of in that, Portland is the best, but sorry, Portland.
Sorry, Portland.
Ooh, can I bait you into some tough talk? What's the rivalry to the cities?
I mean, we actually love each other, but I think there is a little bit of why does it, I mean, we're not that much farther away from Portland. So
yeah.
I sort of think Seattle is like the stopping off to places and people don't actually stick around long enough. So I'm a little annoyed that we're a little second fiddle to Portland, but that's okay. We deep down we're still better. So
I love that. That's the pull quote. We'll put that at the top of the episode.
Yeah.
You'll get
Sorry,
this great rivalry. No, they're very different cities, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think geographically they're different too.
Completely different. Yeah.
The most important thing, I think.
For sure. The West Coast, I'm such a West Coast person, so I'm a big fan of all of it. So I will fight for.
Let's talk about Seattle. Let's talk about Seattle and about how there is an identity in the restaurant community, and you're a big part of it, have been for years. And my question is how do you define your city? I mean, it's not easy, but I think you're up for it. Knowing that there's a lot of perception versus reality happening. There's obviously a big tech stakeholder between Amazon and Microsoft in the area. So there's that happening, which is different from Portland. Sorry, no more Portland talk, but define the city for us.
I mean, I think you're kind of touching on the challenges of the industry as far as trying to kind of rise above what, is the kind of obvious things that people think of when they think of Seattle. I think prior to Amazon, Microsoft, Mania, it was, grunge, and which is a great thing to be, proud of and part of. But yeah, I think the industry itself, I think is it's very community driven. People are really supportive. We're very proud of what we get to do. There's such a huge focus on all the the industry in regards to hospitality, in regards to how we care for our teams, and then at the food level, just kind of impressive ability to just showcase what's so great about the area. Yeah. So the water, the mountains, all the ingredients, the farmers, everything is pretty stellar, and I think unlike a lot of places that I get to visit.
I want to talk a little bit about your style because it's really unique. And then, of course, we'll get to the book. But you've got a lot going on with raw seafood and just seafood in general. And that's a root. And then you've got Rome and Italy as a place that you've spent a lot of time. And you clearly, reading the cookbook, are really inspired by creatively. So how do you think about these two areas working together in your restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're thinking about, especially when we're considering opening something new, we really have a focus around what it's going to be before we even think about opening it. Really, there's an idea or a love of something that we want to share with folks and have as an idea that becomes the restaurant. So the seafood part was really just me traveling a lot and coming home and frankly being kind of irritated that there wasn't a really kind of easygoing, simple spot that you could get oysters without it being attached to a steakhouse or a really fancy restaurant. And so that was just this is what I want in my city kind of idea. And that kind of, I think, continues with the idea that I really, really, really think especially with shellfish in the Northwest, it's some of the best in the world, and we should be celebrating that. And then Rome is just, I mean, anyone that's been there, I think that spends any time outside of just the checking the lists of the Colosseum and everything, culinarily is really, really, really unique and fun and crazy and beautiful and historic and all the things that I think when you're especially a young cook a young cook from America, I would say, from like growing up in the 70s, just this dedication to daily thinking about food in a way that isn't like I'm hungry, but like, what am I going to cook tomorrow? Or I'm going to go to the store and see what's fresh and see what someone who's like managing all of these things is going to tell me is the best or special.
With the backdrop of like one of the world's most iconic cities in terms of like architecture and art, but also just being a thought leader in Italy in terms of like progressive politics, and also just like in terms of cultural movements a lot of it comes out of Rome.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's like you're walking through a museum all the time,
right?
And like it just melts my heart. I love it so much. Where I think about like if there's a place that's not Seattle, it's going to be Rome. If I ever kind of lived anywhere else, and I think just also there's something about being there when you're young and impressionable, and having your eyes kind of widened by a culture that is, similar, but totally not the same as what you grew up with, and similar in that, like, it's really like family focused. And I mean, it's just Rome, but I don't know. There's something about it that just like got under my skin in a way that was just like, it's so important to me as a place that I got to live, and as a place that I thankfully get to return to all the time.
All right, let's talk about cookbook writing. You've just released Sunlight and Breadcrumbs, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. Like you really have done something very cool with the way illustration works with the essay, works really smart recipe development. You've written multiple cookbooks before this. How do you get back on the horse to write this very personal book? How do you get inspired? I mean, books are a slog, and we just went over all of the businesses you're running. You must love writing books if you're going to do a book like this now.
You are funny.
I've written three myself.
I don't know anyone loves writing cookbooks. I don't know. There's something, the creative endeavor of it, I think, is the part that just really keeps you tied to it, because you are creating something that eventually will sit in your hands, and you can kind of obviously go through time and the experiences that you're putting into it. But you also can, experience the making of it again, which is sort of special and wonderful. I don't know. There's books. It's funny, like comparing them like to opening a restaurant. It's a million times harder, which doesn't make a lot of sense because it's just this little thing that shows up, 2.5 years later. But I think the personal part of it. But my first two books are personal, but they were more focused outward on things that like influenced me, or my first book about a whale was the people like close to me in the Northwest that had been really important to me as a cook. And so this one, if I were to talk about it, before I was getting ready to do it, it was kind of just speaking to my history as a human, and the things that happened to me, the choices I made, and then kind of how that has driven like who I am as a cook.
I mean, I'd say artistic choices.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you say choices, this leads to kind of the idea of the cookbook. And I just want to, you quote Louis Bourgeois, in a pretty famous quote: "Art is not about art. Art is about life." So, how is food art?
Yeah, it is a famous quote, and I think I've read it a million times, and I don't think I ever like really got stuck on it until I was thinking about this book, and it made so much sense to me. Where I'm trying to tell a story about my art background and my career, and how those have been together the whole time, and I think not entirely something that I was aware of. I think I have very close friends that are artists and like make their livings doing that, and I think would support me in saying that like art, or air quotes art, is really much more simple than things that hang on a wall in a gallery or in a museum. I think the creative process and creating things to be art doesn't have to be for sale or for even for to live on forever. Like it could be created and then destroyed. So I think for me, like, if it's art, it's probably the act of creating something that like matters to you, or is a story you're trying to tell, or
So that
an
really
idea.
aligns with the idea that art is food and food is
Yeah,
art. Because
for sure.
I mean, you've really laid it out. It doesn't have to be finite. It can be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it could be a moment. It doesn't. I mean, like if you look at the art world in general, like that's blown up all the time with, installations, theater work, things like that. That I think is, you have to be present to see it, and then it's gone.
The concept of this book, then, when you were thinking about the recipe list, you obviously wanted to publish just highly personal recipes, and you tell the story of many throughout your life. Your mother, you have like family recipes, and you've got recipes through the course of your career. But what is the goal with this book for you, generally speaking?
I mean, I think personally for me, it was, I think as a person that's been cooking for 28, well, longer than that, but owning restaurants for 28 years, there's a lot of like self-judgment or questioning of what you're doing along the way, constantly, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having this kind of time to write this book and think about me and my food and the things that have mattered, I was able to kind of admit and also kind of make fun of myself in that, like, these things like the mayonnaise salmon, which isn't really, it's a recipe, but a very simple one, and something that I ate a million times and didn't really consider as delicious or anything. It was just dinner. Is a really important thing to me, and I think to the Northwest. I think if anyone grew up there in the 70s and 80s, and probably even now, people are putting mayonnaise on salmon and throwing it on the grill, and it is like the centerpiece of summer. And so to have the ability and the kind of courage to write something that doesn't have to be a brand new idea, or to tell a story around things that like cumulatively make up my past and my things that are that have given me the time to think about food in a way that isn't just something new, looking forward, what's cool,
mm-hmm.
And giving myself the freedom to write about that in a way that is honoring that, but also just kind of like making fun of it too, where it's just like, it doesn't have to be this 20-step process thing to be important, and it also can be something that's like kind of ridiculous and still be lovely.
So let's talk recipes. I love that mayonnaise salmon recipe, by the way. I called it out as one of my favorites. There's like a lot of cool ideas here, and I like that you are kind of making a statement, like how to dress a green salad. There's roasting chicken ideas, which I think are like obviously part of the paradigm of writing a cookbook, but you have like a real point of view. So let's start with the salad. And how do you dress your green salad, which is a question that until podcasts are basically wiped off the earth will be asked in food podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, so my original training in food was by a woman named Susan Kaplan, who grew up on the East Coast in Maine. And also her family was from France. And so like the kind of French mustard, shallot, vinegar, olive oil dressing, kind of punchy and bright, and has been kind of a go-to for me. And I think in thinking about something that simple and something that is, like a lot of times is like something that you're putting together on a Thursday,
mm-hmm.
that it can still be incredibly delicious if you're able to buy, a slightly better vinegar that has been made by somebody who is like caring for it all along the way. And
totally agree. Like a red wine vinegar that has some terroir.
Yeah.
Really.
And isn't, it's like the $7 bottle of vinegar versus the $7 gallon of vinegar, I guess. But
no, true.
You're needing 3 tablespoons of it. So I think to have something that like you would actually just drink on your own and like think that's yummy, versus so many vinegars that are really harsh and acidic.
They're good for like cleaning metal,
right?
More than anything. Yeah,
delicious
metal cleaning. Yeah.
So yeah, so like for me, a salad is something that's quick and simple. If I'm gonna just have like lettuces, because I want the lettuces, I want to taste them, and I think I want those ingredients that are then on them to be as delicious, but not kind of a little bit harsh.
I like how you are thinking about roasting chicken as a 2-day process, not a brand new idea, but I want to like as it's like a common practice. But yours, you have a great marinade for this chicken. Take us through that.
Yeah. So I've been cooking a lot of things. Well, mayonnaise is one thing that I think is a really great marinade, but also yogurt and even in this case, creme fraiche, where there's a sourness to something that I think adds some flavor and then also texture when you're roasting it. So it's not the prettiest looking thing, but it's really, I mean, it's pretty in a like, intensely darkened chicken, which I love.
Yeah.
But the flavor that you get from something that sits overnight in the fridge, and I'm someone who is often like, damn it, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for admitting that.
And I still roast the chicken and I might put the marinade on it and it won't be the same. But if you can and put it in your fridge with, uncovered on a tray so that it can dry out a little bit, it really just adds that crispiness and kind of extra loveliness that you can get with a roast chicken.
Put a cal reminder on.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. I know. I've often done the other thing where it's like 3 days later and I'm like, oh, that chicken's still in the fridge.
Oh,
So no one's perfect. But I think the quality of the skin and the texture and then the moisture that you get from it is better.
Yeah. Okay, so why do you like a boring sandwich?
I've been thinking about this a lot because my husband has a sandwich shop and his sandwiches are anything but boring. They're like the opposite of mine. And I've been asked this before where, where does this come from? And I think two things. One, I'm a cook, and so I'm like eating in a hurry. And two, I spent a fair amount of time in France and in Italy where sandwiches are, I think so delicious and by and large compared to like an American sandwich connoisseur kind of boring. So like, a baguette with salami and cheese and maybe some cornichon and that's it. Or hopefully some butter maybe is not hard. And it's certainly not a lot of stuff going on, but it's super delicious.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, you could keep adding things like some gross lettuce that's going to wilt or a bad tomato, and it's not going to make it better. And I think there's some pleasure and also just like confidence around something that if you're putting the right things on it and making, like choices around what cheese or what salami, it can be stellar.
I agree. Like you want to really just not just force in those bad products. Speaking of sandwiches, I love this place, Mean Sandwich. That's like I went 3 times.
I love that.
In Seattle.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
I think there's it has a similar confidence except for there's just a lot more going on. And I think there's courage in that where, Dan will, like the Mean Sandwich comes with mint on it. And
yeah. Is this your husband's place?
Yeah, this is
Oh my God, I had no idea. I was like,
I love that.
No, for real. I was like, I don't know if this is like competition.
Like, why does she like this sandwich shop?
Dude, it's amazing. Oh, so that's your husband? Shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, I went 3 times in 2 visits.
I love this.
I love this place.
Freak out.
Yeah.
So like he'll basically say, just try it as it is. I'm not taking the mint off, and if you hate it, I'll buy the sandwich back, which is great because I think it's forcing people to kind of live outside their comfort zone, which I think is the best part about learning about food is discovering things. And so if we all kind of did the same, if we ate the same thing every day, how horrible would that be? I mean, it blows my mind that people do. So, so I think a boring sandwich, my favorite, is equally delicious as one with like 20 things on it.
The maximus. You laid out the point well. Let's get to that salmon slathered with mayonnaise, 1970s classic. As you're right, a family favorite of yours. And I want to ask you, I mean, if we don't have like this amazing Seattle salmon, is it still going to work? How do we think about this recipe?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be a bad promoter of Washington if I didn't say that anyone can have really great salmon if you buy frozen salmon and have it shipped to you. So there's, in my book, there's resources for that for sure. I think we have a tendency to think that like fresh, quote unquote, is better. And can tell everyone that that's not the case when it comes to salmon. If you don't live like by a dock and
you don't live in like
Pacific,
Juneau, Alaska.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we serve mostly throughout the year Bristol Bay sockeye salmon, which is a amazingly successful salmon run in Alaska, and we buy it all frozen. That is perfect. So that would be the perfect solution to this challenge around where do we get the salmon. Otherwise, mayonnaise is delicious on other fish too. So it would be really great on a piece of halibut. I think the last time I did this recipe, I added some of the green sauce, the ginger green sauce, to the mayonnaise and then put that on the salmon. So that on any, striped bass or even on like shrimp on the grill would be really, really
So
delicious.
how do we do it? What's the mayonnaise? What is in the marinade with the mayonnaise? And if we have an oven, does it work as well, or does it have to be grilled?
No, oven's great.
Yeah.
We would my mom would put it on. It was like such like burned into my mind, like foiled sheet tray salmon mayonnaise stuff on it in the oven or in on the grill, depending on what year it was. It doesn't need to be on a grill, and it doesn't need to be anything fancy. I think the mayonnaise, like the actual recipe is mayonnaise, salt, and pepper, which isn't really, like I said, not much of a recipe. But like, they're in the book, there's 3 green sauce recipes, and there's always leftovers. And I think that's a really great thing. Even just on like a ham sandwich, adding that to mayonnaise and putting that on your bread would be, mayonnaise is great. Mayonnaise with ginger and cilantro and jalapeno or whatever is even better. So that on whatever it is that you're going to cook, I think tossed. You don't want it like gloppy. You want it kind of like a nice coating. But if it's really gloppy, then you're going to have these blobs of salmon, blobs of mayonnaise, which might be great. I don't know. Like, I think kind of a little more even over the surface.
You want to paint it evenly, but if you have those little globs, I think that'd be great, actually. All right. So you kind of put forth a challenge about the cauliflower, about
the burnt cauliflower.
Yeah, you basically my question is, how far can you take roasted cauliflower to the the edge of being burnt?
I mean, I think it can go. I mean, I don't. You don't want it to turn into charcoal. So I think that's too far for
those
sure.
bites are not my favorite.
Those aren't the best ones.
Yeah,
but I do think there's a tendency. And I find this with cooks that I cook with to like home cooks where I think people are afraid to push that cooking of something. I mean, and I would say the same way there's recipes in the book that are described as long cooking vegetables where you go like past the point of pretty. And I think it's a classic Italian way of cooking vegetables is you essentially stew them to a point of like this luscious deliciousness. But in regards to the cauliflower, like you want it to be textural. So I think that char and the crispiness that you get from roasting something really hard adds to that like kind of soft steamed interior that you're going to get of the cauliflower as well. And a lot of that comes from like not fussing with it. I think we are not overcrowding a pan. If you're putting too much on a pan, it's just going to steam and then the sides that are touching aren't going to get any color or certainly aren't going to burn unless you really burn them. So
you need to have less on the pan, probably a little more oil, and space them and take them right to the edge.
Yeah. And I mean, I think helpful if you try it, before, and then decide like, can it go farther?
Oh yeah, right around the way. I mean, we roast vegetables. You take out that first one. You're like, okay, not quite.
And this recipe is there's a actually both cauliflower recipes in the book kind of are forcing you to cook it farther than I think you would imagine it. So,
I love that. I mean, you're giving it's like it's a cosign.
Yeah,
like go far, go hard.
Why not? I mean, it's just cauliflower.
So the oyster pan at home. I'm just gonna say it's something I just like am intimidated by, like doing an oyster pan, and you at your restaurants do it so well, many different ways. The oyster bake, the oyster pan. You've got a great one with yuzu kosho cream in the book, but sell us a little bit on why this can be done at home, why it's a great meal, like a dinner party or whatnot.
So I have a special love for like oyster pan roasts because when I took over my first restaurant, Boat Street, there was a similar recipe that had it had actually the cornmeal biscuit to go with it, but it was more traditional with like bacon and diced tomato and things like that. And I think the it was delicious. But my favorite thing were these women that were probably in their like 70s that would come in and they would all order it, and they were all it was such a nostalgic food for them that it just like, I couldn't be happier that these ladies would come in and order a bottle of like Chablis or something and eat pan roast all together. And I think it's like it's one of those things that isn't common or even cooked very often, like you're saying. And I think so having someone try to cook it at home is probably like, all right, give it a go. But it's super easy. Oysters, pre-shucked oysters that come in the little jar, can live in a freezer for a really long time. And it's like if you end up with cream in your house, like, and bacon, or, you don't even need the yuzu kosho. It's a really quick, easy, and incredibly kind of decadent dinner, that would come together very quickly. And I think the idea of that briny, delicious oyster, at home, I don't know. It's so warming and comforting to me that I can't imagine. If you like oysters, I think this is something you should try.
I mean, I think like you made a case for it. And when you're talking about in the jar, are we talking about still fresh?
Yeah, they're fresh in a jar, but oysters, they're remarkably durable creatures.
Totally.
And the oysters that like Hama Hama will sell in the jar, or really, and a lot of these oysters are coming out of Washington that you'll see in stores all over the country, and they have a pretty decent shelf life, but they also can live in your freezer. And you can just get they're like quart or half pints, which would be enough for two. It's a lot, like oysters are intense. And so, and it's really kind of affordable too. Like I think the shucked, it's called shucked product, which is kind of funny, but shucked product is, it's the oyster that is, not going to end up in a half shell oyster bar. So it's a product that is not, it's not touched a million times to be this beautiful, pristine thing that you get on your oyster tray. It's like kind of what's naturally growing on the beach, harder to shuck. So it takes a really talented person who's willing to shuck a bazillion oysters to get them in these jars.
I mean, Renee, it's like really smart if you want to do an oyster dish at home and like your shucking skills aren't there, which is like most people.
Yeah.
Just roast them and use this shucked product.
Well, and even if you destroy them while shucking them, it won't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Right. You can do that too, of course. Yeah. That's actually, and that's the hedge as well. You can destroy them, mutilate them.
I mean, and and no one will see it. No, you won't have to like be like, oh, I'm not good at this. Like nobody will care. No one will know. And I think if you get shell in it, you can, put it in a bowl and kind of scoop the oyster out of the liquor, strain the liquor away so that you get rid of the shell, and then you have this clean liquor from the oyster.
Have you done your 10,000 oyster hours of shucking? 10,000 hours?
I've shucked a lot of oysters, yes. I love it. It's my favorite. Actually, the end of this trip, I'll be at an oyster festival, so I'll get to do more.
I love it. That's... Is it basically if you do 100, you're set, or do you need to do?
More than that.
You need like a couple.
I mean, I think if you're doing 100, like for like a month, like then you're good at it, because it becomes like reflex. Like you don't have to look anymore, and you can just shuck an oyster without destroying it. I mean, some of it's case by case because they're all different, but it takes time.
So you really sold me on pears, Bosch pears, and I love this recipe with white wine, sugar, rosemary, orange, and vanilla. And the photo is great. So beautiful photography, but you're making me think like this is almost like the perfect dessert for any cuisine, just because it feels pretty simple to pull together. And sometimes like you've got chocolate fans and non-chocolate fans, you've got dairy fans, you've got non-dairy fans, gluten fans and non-gluten fans, and you've got this dessert. Kind of like I'm pretty excited to make it myself.
It's I think falls into the nostalgia category for me because I have poached a lot of pears in my time, and poached them for cakes, poached them for like, marzipan tarts, poached them for all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, like I just really like the pear. My mom, when we were kids, she would can pears, and so that texture of a pear, also the same like kind of gritty texture, I say that in the best way, of pear juice in Italy. Like it has such a deep love to me. Like I just think that kind of like perfect, fine, soft, but also has that like kind of weird little sandy bit that pears have, is so lovely. And I think in a syrup, and like you said, like you could add like star anise or chili or cardamom to it, and it would transform into like any sort of meal, I think, really well.
So you're basically taking these grocery store pears essentially and poaching them in this
peeling them and poaching
peeling
them.
and poaching seems like pretty basic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing, the opposite of everything else is you don't want to overcook them.
Yeah.
You want them cooked to the point where they're tender, but otherwise they'll fall apart.
They'll be too mushy. Yeah. I love that. Renee, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire Fast and Furious taste check. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
The best fruit.
Nectarines.
How do you judge a nectarine?
I smell it. And I judge where I get it before I smell it. So, and it's highly seasonal, but it's still,
very seasonal. The worst vegetable.
Mushy carrots, overcooked carrots, and bean sprouts.
Yeah. That doesn't come up. The bean sprouts doesn't come up a lot, but it can be a tough hang. Agree fully. Yeah. Nice.
Kooky, I know.
The best dessert.
Ooh, gelato.
All right. I actually just got back from Rome last night, and I was in Puglia and Naples as well. And I think I had 14 gelatos.
I love this.
Tell me, what makes it so special?
I mean, you can walk around with it, which is great.
Sure.
It's available kind of, almost everywhere.
Yeah.
I like that it's more intensely flavored than ice cream.
Yes.
I like that its texture is smoother and silkier than ice cream. I like that there's a bazillion flavors. I like that there's so much creativity around it. Like people are just trying anything to make a flavor for gelato. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. I like that you get I hate the paper or the wood spoons, but I like the cute little spoon that you get. I just love it. It's Rome.
So my favorite too was Frigarium and Gayoden in Naples.
Okay.
I thought those were my two favorites. What are your faves? This is off the dome.
I think Otoleg has been my favorite. And then there's one that I think it's actually Otoleg too, but it's farther towards Testaccio where, and I haven't been back, but in my memory of favorite gelatos was a black sesame, not pistachio, black sesame gelato that just was unbelievably delicious.
I liked Otoleg a lot too. That was probably my top 5. And it's gelato spelled backwards, if you're wondering. Restaurant you are most excited to visit in the world?
Armando El Pantheon.
Tell me about it.
It's just like a historic, I mean, it's across the street from the Pantheon for one, so you just can't believe you're in a restaurant that serves really delicious food there. I love the lamb scotadito so much that I'm always wanting to go there. I love how they serve really seasonally unique vegetables. They make these like lasagna-like things out of like eggplant parmesan, but with zucchini. And the pasta is just outrageous, and they're so nice, and I just love it there. So good. It's like a little bit trapped in time too, which I love, and it feels like I've landed in Rome when I get to go eat there.
I'm just like, I didn't go there. I'm really bummed right now.
You can go back.
I go back. I'm gonna go back. All right, a few more. Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Oh, this one's hard. I think Marcella Hazan's.
Yeah.
Italian. The other one that I think is funny, I was looking up reviews and doesn't get great reviews, which I think is, I don't know why I was looking it up, but I was like, I wonder what other people think of this book, is Margot Henderson's Everyone's Invited.
Yeah.
I think is what it's called now that I can't remember it, and it's out of print. And I love it because it's so particular to her. And I have a huge love for the idea of having like really elegant, restrained food, and hers is just so beautiful.
It sounds like your food.
Yeah,
It sounds like your book.
She's a huge hero.
Sounds like your
mine.
book. It sounds like. I mean, I just can't stress enough. Sunlight and Breadcrumbs is one of my favorites of the year so far.
I love that.
Just terrific work there. Don't read the reviews.
I know. I don't. I normally don't, but I was because there was nothing about it really, and I was Anyways, I was just like, ugh. I was like, you don't get it, people.
You don't get it. Yeah. Do you have a favorite recent cookbook discovery?
Um, I, I've been really, really excited about learning Indian food. So the Dashum cookbook, which isn't recent, but it's a few years old. I love Mira Soda's books. I love.
Yeah.
I'm really the flavors are so intense and not something that I'm used to, and I'm just so excited to learn about it. So I would say that's kind of a category of books that I just love reading about people's like their version of growing up with these nostalgic meals and dishes that are so important to them culturally. So I love that.
Khushbu Shah's American is a great one too. It's worth checking out.
Yeah.
She did a great job.
She was just in Seattle not too long ago.
She did a great job with that book. Favorite city outside America to visit for food?
Rome and London. Don't get two.
You can get two. We've talked about Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah. London.
And London. Yeah.
Your favorite sandwich?
Pizza Bianca with mortadella. Folded in half.
I had that at Forno Campo di Fiore just 2 days ago. Sorry.
Jealous.
No flex here. It just came to mind.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't go to Armando, but.
Went to Forno Campo di Fiore. That's a great call.
The Pizza Bianca, the salty, oily, crispy, bubbly. It's heaven.
Do you serve it at one of your restaurants?
Not as well as theirs, but yes. You're
just chasing it.
I know. It's really magical.
Renee Erickson, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you for having me.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.